What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So I have finally got my truck back from the dealership after what, almost a month. I believe it was there for probably about 2 weeks or so with the misfiring issue. They determined that was the PCM. They replaced the PCM. The new PCM they got wouldn't write or read, something like that. I can't remember which. So they had to send that one back, order a new one. They supposedly overnight emergency ordered the new one, but because of the shipping delays of FedEx, that's who it shipped through, and it took almost 2 weeks for the new one to come in that they emergency ordered. So that's why it was there for so long. I got it back, had it for a day, and literally a day later started doing the same thing. I cranked it up the next morning, and it was idling super rough. I went to hit the gas, and it wouldn't even rev at all. Like, no response at all from the throttle. And again, we were in the middle of moving at the time, so I was like, you know what, I don't have time to deal with it. Plus, they had just worked on it anyways and replaced the PCM literally the day before, so it went right back to the dealership. And this time, I was going to try to drive it to the dealership. It wouldn't even drive, or crank up. So later that day, because it acted up that morning, later that day I cranked it back up. It wouldn't even crank. It cranked, but no start. It just turned over, never actually would even fire off. So it ended up getting towed back to the dealership. After it got towed back, they said it cranked up for them just fine. It ran rough, they said, for about 30 seconds and then smoothed out and had no issues. So they couldn't recreate it, but they still looked into it. After looking into it, they said my mass airflow meter was reading way off. They said it was only reading like half of what it should be, but it was throwing no check engine lights, no codes, nothing like that. But I think that might have been a tuning issue, not 100% sure, because since they had just reprogrammed the PCM, I put it back on the stock tune, and this is a tune required intake. So it was on the stock tune with a tune required intake, which I believe is probably what was throwing off the mass airflow sensor. But since they said it was reading wrong, they pulled the mass airflow sensor out, and there's a spacer on the mass airflow sensor for this aftermarket PMOS intake, and that spacer just completely crumbled. It was dry rot when they took it out. So now I've got to get a spacer for that. I did a temporary fix, just threw some cardboard in there. I ended up having to do like 3 or 4 layers of cardboard. I'll show you that in a minute. But also the battery is toast from being dead for so long and jumped and dead and jumped off again. So just pulled the old battery out. About to put a new battery. Well, that's the old one. New battery's over there. About to put a new battery in it. But you can see here on the intake. So if you see up in there, I had to make a little cardboard spacer for my my mass airflow sensor. Without that, the mass airflow sensor hits the other side of the intake tube. And apparently that throws it off enough that the truck will not start, period, at all. Because before I put that in there, nothing, just, but wouldn't actually fire off. I put those spacers, I thickened up the spacers because I had already made some when I drove it home from the dealership. Me and the dealership did that just so I could drive it home that day. But I guess the cardboard had collapsed, and I had to put more cardboard spacers in there. So there's like 5 layers of cardboard now, but it's enough that the mass airflow sensor is not touching their side. And as soon as I spaced it out enough that it wasn't touching, truck cranked right up. But I still have the other issue with the park switch sensor. Can't remember exactly what it's called. I don't remember if I mentioned that before or not. I think I did, but that's the reason why my dash lights are staying on 24/7 even after the truck's been off for hours. My instrument cluster lights are still on, so I'm about to pop a new battery in it and replace the park position sensor. So it's a sensor that is on the bottom side of the shifter in the center console, and when it goes bad, the truck doesn't think that it's in park, even though it is. So since it doesn't think that it's in park, those lights stay on 24/7, thus killing the battery. All right, so new battery is in. Now, I have not touched the truck, like opened the doors or anything, in quite a while now, and you can see the instrument cluster lights are on. So that is what I was referring to about the instrument cluster. Those lights stay on 24/7 and they do not go off because the sensor and the shifter is bad. So let's replace that now. But first, make sure it cranks up and is running. I haven't cranked it in a few days. Well, that's not good. Okay. Of course, back to this problem. So, hopefully the cardboard is just collapsed again and is touching, that mass airflow sensor is touching the intake tube, and that's my problem. Because this is what I was doing before, but as soon as I put some more cardboard in there to space it a little further, it cranked right up. Alright, well, let me pull that out. Alright, so I just pulled the intake out. So, pulled the lid off. See mass airflow sensor right there. The spacers are made of cardboard, but it is spaced out correctly still. So you can see up in there. So, it's not touching, still good size gap right there on the top. So that is not my issue, but I do have a new sensor, so I'm going to go ahead and throw the new mass airflow sensor in there and see if that's what it is. Alright, so I've got the new sensor in. About to try it again. But I do just want to take a moment to say it's important in times like this to count your blessings when you might be mad and aggravated at something. But I remember how lucky and blessed I am to have a shop now. Because just 3-4 weeks ago, I would have been doing this outside in the driveway. And even though I don't have heat out here yet, it is awesome to have the shop to work in. I went from a garage that I couldn't even fit my truck in at all to now I have a garage so big I can fit my truck with a 12-foot trailer behind it in here. So barely fits. That's why it's so far forward and almost sticking out the door, but it fits even with a 12-foot trailer behind it. All right, let's try this again and see if this works. Cross my fingers and say a little prayer and hope that it does. Hope and a prayer. That's what I'm asking for. Dear Lord, please let this crank up and have just been the sensor. My wife just came outside. She's over there shaking her head too. Oh, maybe? Okay. All right. It cranked for like 2 seconds, sputtered, and shut off. Oh. See, it won't stay running though. It won't stay running. Okay, so I tried this the other day. I want to try it again. It didn't work the other day, but still want to give it a try. Some cars this will work, some cars it won't. because they're so dependent on the electronics and sensors on these newer cars. But I unplugged the mass airflow sensor, because if the mass airflow sensor is not reading correctly and I unplug it, it's got no signal at all. Some cars, it will force it to rely on other sensors to run, and then we'll just throw a check engine light for the mass airflow sensor. But that did not work the other day when I tried it. Okay, so it is running. So it's throwing a wrench light and a check engine light and even traction control light, but it's running. Makes me think that it is an issue with the sensor. I really need to contact PMOS and get that spacer so I can, you know, get rid of that cardboard, get a proper spacer back in there. But it did crank up, so I'm thinking it's the sensor. It revs fine. But it won't idle though. As soon as I take my foot off the gas, it wants to shut off. Yep. Alright, it's gotta be that sensor. Alright, so I plugged the sensor back in. I cranked it up. And cranked back up. But that's not me revving it. The truck is doing that on its own. Yep, and it shut off. So sensor in, sensor out, it's still doing the same thing. Oh boy. Alright, so we had to push the truck out earlier and it still will not start. And because of the incline coming up in the garage, we cannot by hand get it pushed back in. But I've got a brush guard on the truck, or on the Crown Vic, push bar on the Crown Vic and a brush guard on the truck. Is there not a Crown Vic key on this ring? Oh, there it is. Trying to find the Crown Vic key. So, brush guard to brush guard, I want to try to use the Crown Vic to push the truck back into the garage. I also need to replace the shift interlock on the Crown Vic because it won't come out of park. It takes like a minute for the car to warm up and then all of a sudden will come out of park. I don't know if you can see it. It was nice and bright 2 seconds ago. I don't know why it went dim. But you can also see 299,904. I got 96 miles to go. 96 miles to go until this car hits 300,000. But it just kept rolling and rolling. And I'm not hitting the horn, by the way, guys. The car, every time I turn to the left, the horn is going off. That is a new thing it just started doing. I'm not hitting the horn. Not hitting the horn. Great. All right, let me see if I can push this truck into the garage. it's in. Now I can push it back by hand now it's up the hill. I just need the Crown Vic to get it in the garage. Now that's in, we'll do it by hand. All right, you're good. It's in the garage. It ain't going anywhere now because it's on flat ground. So now that's in the garage, I can do it by hand. I just need to get the tires up that. Once the front tires are past the garage door, we're good. Come on the other side, please. Oh, I didn't forget that till just now. All right. Oh, darn it. That's all I got. It's just a mower in the way. All right, folks. Well, that's all I got for you today. So let's go ahead and wrap it up with today's verse of the day, which comes from Proverbs chapter 19, verse 17. Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done. Again, that's Proverbs chapter 19, verse 17. All right, guys. Till next time, stay safe, stay blessed.